Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Richard Cruz, and joining us today from the Australian Army is Officer Cadet Cooper Collishaw. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by visitors to the memorial. If you're able, I invite you all to please stand and join in singing the national anthem. If you're able, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn their loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths and floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Private Richard Murray. Richard Murray was born on the 28th of November 1914 in Lanarkshire, Scotland, the son of Frank and Catherine Murray. As a young man, he immigrated to Australia, where he worked as a labourer and fought as a welterweight boxer. In 1934, he married Margaret Brooks in the Sydney suburb of Hurstville. The couple went on to have a son, Frank. Murray enlisted in the 2nd Australian Imperial Force on the 12th of August, 1940. His early service was marked by a series of indiscretions, such as being absent without leave and using insubordinate language, for which he was punished. Originally posted to the 2nd 19th Battalion, he later served with the 22nd Brigade Headquarters. He was popular within his unit and was closest with Private Keith Botterill. Following Japan's entry into the war in December of 1941, the units of the 8th Division were involved in fierce fighting against the Japanese forces on the Malayan Peninsula. On the 14th of February 1942, Commonwealth forces in Malaya were forced to surrender, and Private Murray was among the 45,000 British and Australian troops who became prisoners of war. He was initially held at Changi Prisoner of War Camp, but the Japanese soon called for working parties to build and expand new infrastructure across their empire. Murray joined a couple of working parties and, in July, volunteered to join B Force, which left for Borneo in July 1942. Assured of better food and conditions, the almost 1,500 members of B Force found themselves on a hellish sea journey, crammed into cargo holds of the UB Maru for 11 days before arriving at Sandakan. Conditions at Sandakan soon developed into some of the worst experienced by prisoners of the Japanese. Prisoners, including the sick, were forced at gunpoint to work on the construction of a military airstrip and were often beaten by their captors. Illness and death ravaged the camp, and food was scarce. The completed airfield was soon beset by Allied aircraft bombing, and between January and March 1945, those prisoners who were made to walk were forced into a series of marches west to Ranu, a distance of around 260 kilometres. Murray was among the 455 fittest prisoners forced into undertaking the first march. The journey was horrendous. The Japanese guards refused to let the prisoners rest, and those too sick or weak to continue were left behind to die or executed by the guards. Murray placed himself at the rear to help those who fell behind and to support those who were struggling. Just 309 men made it to Ranu, including Private Murray. The Ranu camp provided no shelter, and with little to no food, the rate of deaths among the prisoners rose daily. Murray and his mate, Botterill, began to volunteer for rice-carrying parties, taking each opportunity to steal extra rations for the prisoners. In April of 1945, a seriously ill Botterill began to give up hope. Murray refused to allow this and dragged him outside, doggedly forcing him to keep going. The next month, Murray, Botterill, and a handful of other prisoners found a food store and smuggled some rice back to the camp. On the 20th of May, the guards discovered the stolen food and lined up the 30 surviving prisoners, demanding a confession. In order to save his mates from reprisals, Murray stepped forward and claimed responsibility. He was taken away and executed by the guards. He was 30 years old. Botterill was devastated by his friend's death, but rallied enough to escape the camp. He was one of only 6 Sandakan prisoners to survive the war. After the war, a recovery team was able to identify Murray's remains, and he was buried at the Labuan War Cemetery in Malaysia. In 1996, a headstone was placed on his grave, bearing the epitaph, "He stepped forward to sacrifice his life for his mates, lest we forget." His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my left, among almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. His photograph is displayed beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private Richard Murray, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them. Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub of Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes this evening's last post ceremony. We thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial and wish you all a very good evening. Thank you.